People overeat and yet don't put on weight. Other people overeat even just a little bit and they seem to accumulate extra adipose tissue. And most people struggle to lose fat. And so the nervous system and the role of the brain and other neurons has been vastly overlooked in the discussion about losing fat. Calories in versus calories out, meaning how many calories you ingest versus how many calories you burn, is the fundamental and most important formula in this business of fat loss. It's just fewer calories than you burn that you will lose weight, and that a significant portion of that will come from body fat. There are a couple bins, a couple items that you should make sure you're getting correctly. And again, sleep, sufficient EPAs, glutamine if you have issues with leaky gut or sugar cravings can really help. Get your gut microbiome right, and then make sure that your thyroid hormone is supported through the ingestion of sufficient iodine, not too much, and sufficient selenium, not too much. Well, for people who have cravings issues, they crave sweets all the time. Many people who are craving sugar can satisfy that sugar craving by giving the neurons, so to speak, what they actually want, which are amino acids and essential fatty acids. That includes EPA, but also things like glutamine, an amino acid that can really reduce sugar craving. An incredible study that was done by my colleague, Aaliyah Crum at Stanford, looking at how belief effects, just thinking, can impact the effects of things like exercise on weight loss. The take-home message from this study was that simply being told that movement is good for you, can lead to weight loss, etc., led to significantly more body fat loss simply by the knowledge that movement and exercise can help various health markers. So this is remarkable, and it speaks to the power of the nervous system and the power of belief in governing aspects of our body and our physiology. Said that you got to mobilize, you got to burn fat, and that your nervous system is in control of that process. It's not just about calorie deficit. What they did was they examined people who overate and did not gain weight. And what they observed was that those people engaged in lots of subtle movement throughout the day. In other words, they were fidgeters. That fidgeters, people that bounce their knee, people that have a head bob while they're listening, people that nod a lot, people that stand up and sit down a lot throughout the day, and people that pace burn anywhere from 800 to 2,500 calories more. Shivering is one of the strongest stimuli that one can incorporate to stimulate fat loss. Typically by taking cold showers or by getting into cold water of some other kind, a lake or a river or a cold bath or an ice bath. Find a temperature that induces shiver for you. That's going to vary depending on your cold tolerance and how cold adapted you are. 1 to 3, maybe 5 times a week. Get in until you, or get under the shower or whatever it is, until you start to shiver, genuinely shiver. Then, after about a minute or so, get out. Spend 1 to 3 minutes out, but don't dry off. Get back in for anywhere from 1 to 3 minutes, but try and access the shiver point again. And you might do 3 repetitions of that. So it's 3 times in and 3 times out total. There's some anecdotal evidence that people who have quote unquote stubborn body fat, if they start to adopt new patterns of exercise, they can start to access those stubborn fat pads. Simple way, the most fluid way to have this conversation about exercise and fat loss is in terms of 3 general types of training, whether or not it's done with weights or body weight. High intensity interval training, sprint interval training, so that's going to be very high intensity or SIT, or moderate intensity continuous training, MICT. If it's moderate intensity, so-called zone 2 cardio type exercise, at the 90-minute point, if you happen to have eaten before the exercise within 1 to 3 hours prior to the exercise, then you reduce the amount of fat that you will burn from 90 minutes onward. Whereas if you had fasted prior to the exercise, you hadn't eaten anything for 3 hours or more prior to the exercise, at the 90-minute point, 90 minutes of exercise, you will start to burn more fat than you would had you eaten. Exercise intensely for 20 to 60 minutes The higher the intensity, obviously, the shorter that bout is going to be, and then move over into zone 2 cardio. And if you do that fasted, or the medium intensity cardio, I should say, and if you do that fasted, then indeed you will burn a higher percentage of body fat. What's interesting is that all the studies that I was able to find on what happens after that type of exercise showed that the percentage of fat that you burn after high intensity exercise is actually greater. In other words, you burn a lot of glycogen during the high intensity exercise, and then after the exercise, sometimes for up to 24 hours, and it is during that period of time that you oxidize more fat. You should pick exercise that you like, that you're going to do regularly, but it does seem that the high intensity exercise followed by moderate intensity exercise is going to be optimal for fat burning overall. But you need exercise for other reasons. Caffeine can enhance the amount of fat that you burn in any duration of exercise, and it can shift the percentage of fat that you oxidize compared to glycogen. Out for 15 minutes and you drank caffeine before you went, yes, you'll probably oxidize more fat per unit time. Can you compensate for the exercise you're not doing just by drinking caffeine? Well, probably if you were just talking about fat loss. Look at different diets. You look at low-fat diets, high-fat diets, keto diets, intermittent fasting. Provided people stick to their particular diet, it doesn't really matter which diet you follow. You can still get a caloric deficit and you get weight loss. From the purely scientific standpoint, there's also an advantage to keeping insulin low. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean you go to zero carbohydrate. I've talked before about my preferred way of eating is to go low or no carbohydrate throughout the day for alertness, to get that adrenaline release and the focus that goes with it, et cetera, and the ability and to think and move and do all the things I need to do during the day. And then I eat carbohydrates at night because it facilitates the transition to sleep. That's what works for me. But when insulin is low, you do place your system in a position to oxidize more fat. In particular, we've explored this topic from the perspective of the nervous system, how neurons, and in particular the release of things like adrenaline, epinephrine, can facilitate fat mobilization and oxidation.